Mike's here in the building? No, he was here. Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Good evening. The February 20th, 2019 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. At this time, I request that everyone please turn off or mute all cell phones and electronic devices. Also, I ask everyone please stand with me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Conditional use permit requests will be heard tonight, and once the commission makes a recommendation, the applications will be scheduled to be introduced at the Monday, March 11th, 2019 County Council meeting. Public comment will be taken tonight and at the council meeting on Monday, March 11th, 2019. Public comment on conditional use permit applications will not be taken at any meeting of the county council held thereafter. Applications for rezonings will also be heard tonight, and once the commission makes a recommendation, the applications will be scheduled to be introduced at the Monday, March 11th, 2019 County Council meeting. Applications for a preliminary subdivision plat heard during tonight's meeting will be voted on by the Planning and Zoning Commission during the meeting. The vote on the preliminary plat is final. Only a recommendation for denial of a preliminary plat will be heard before the county council. The following documents are introduced as a matter of record for this evening's public hearing and regular meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission. Those documents are the Unified Development Ordinance of St. Charles County, including zoning maps, and the year 2030 Master Plan for St. Charles County, which includes the year 2030 Future Land Use Plan map. I see we have a quorum. Do I have a motion to open the meeting?
So moved.
For a
Second.
All in favor, sign aye.
Aye.
Okay. A little brief introduction as to how we conduct the meeting. I will read the application into the record. We will ask the applicant to come forward. Then or anyone else speaking on behalf of the applicant. Then we will open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak regarding the application can come forward at that time during the public hearing. Then we will close the public hearing. Once the public hearing is closed, we will take no more comments. Then we will have the applicant, if they so desire, to come back and address any concerns or issues that arose during the public hearing. And then at that time, the commission will discuss the matter and take a vote on the application. And we will wait for
Michael.
The first item on the agenda is conditional use permit request, CUP 18-18. Owner applicant Robert G. Brinkman and Kim Brinkman. Property zoning A, agricultural district. Use requested, buildings, structures, or open spaces for conducting weddings and/or wedding receptions or other private parties. The parcel size is 26.623 acres. The location is approximately 900 feet east of Femi Osage Creek on the north side of Highway F. This is located in Council District 2. Staff.
Thank you. If I could have my laptop, the image on the laptop, please. Thank you. The blue dot here represents the location of the property we're discussing, but very quickly, just to orient everyone, the yellow line on the east, on the right is Highway 94 South. Just north of Defiance, you see Highway F that branches off. This is Highway F here. Highway F, as you probably remember, passes Lindenwood Park, which is known as, a lot of people know it as the Boone Home property. That's a county park. And then past that property, I'm going to zoom in here, again where the blue dot's located. Past the park, there's another property as you round the corner for Highway F, right before Finley Osage Road. You may remember seeing a really kind of imposing rock or stone structure. It looks like a barn, and that's really the structure that we're talking about. The way I understand from the owners, and they can explain this better than I can, but as explained by the owners, this may be one of the oldest structures, if not in St. Charles County and possibly in the state, because it's their understanding that it's constructed about 1809, and if I remember right, it's known sometimes as the Bryant Mill property. You may know the Bryant family as intertwined with the Boone family. And there's quite a history here, which I won't repeat because it's not the purpose of this consideration tonight. But I just wanted to let you know that this is the property that we're talking about. What was started out, as I understand it, a mill, maybe a horse-powered mill, and then it became a barn, is a large open structure that's multi-leveled, and the request is to, for approval of a conditional use permit to allow weddings and other gatherings to take place on this property, but specifically in the barn and in other structures on the property. What I call the barn. It's no longer a barn. It's been converted to other usable space. But as the photographs I've seen, it still retains the character of the barn with the open, the wooden beams, and it's really a charming interior and exterior. The conditional use permit includes two properties side by side with a total of 104 acres, but they've applied only to operate the conditional use permit on 26 of those 104 acres. So the back portion they're not proposing to include in the conditional use permit. It's all wooded, it's hilly terrain. They're not proposing to locate any of these activities on that portion. The property is zoned agricultural, and in the master plan, I believe it's split for agricultural and also rural residential on the north. There's a subdivision on the north side of this property. About 2,700 feet away are the nearest homes from this building, the Callaway Farms, what people refer to as the Callaway Farms. The property now has two houses. It's used for agricultural purposes, and it has a vineyard, and which is used for the property owner's personal use. The events that they would like to hold on the property, specifically the conditional use permit is for, quote, buildings, structures, or open spaces for conducting weddings and or wedding receptions or other private parties, end quote. They're thinking about conducting approximately 1 to 2 events per week inside the historic barn, and at a future reception pavilion, and at a wedding pergola on site, which I would call kind of a rustic pergola, with up to 100 events per year and a maximum guest count of 200 persons per event. Now that maximum number of 200 persons per event is significant because that also corresponds with the building codes about how many people can occupy that historic barn structure without substantial changes to the structure, for instance, sprinklers and things like that. They're not proposing a kitchen in this facility. They're not, or a bar, neither one. So it'll be essentially a meeting hall where they would hold receptions, and they would hold weddings on the property. Could be outdoors. It could potentially be indoors as well inside the historic barn. Based on the maximum occupancy of 200 persons, the minimum of 52 parking spaces would be required in the concept plan that you have within your packet. Let me see if I've got a copy of the concept plan. Hold up here. 1 second, I'm sorry. There we go. The colorized concept plan that's in your packet shows the proposed layout of the property, including those 52 parking spaces that I mentioned, as well as vineyards and other buildings as well. They are incorporating the possibility of building another outbuilding, for instance, as a kitchen, so they can prepare food on site. That's a possibility that they'll be taking into account with this concept. In terms of lighting, this has come up recently, and with conditional use permits, they're proposing traditional lighting on the barn and on the homes on the property. Otherwise, there will be just low-level accent lighting that will be used on the grounds. And we're talking about like a half-a-foot candle, so it's very low kind of accent lighting. You may recall also conditional use permits have specific criteria that this body and as well as the county council take into consideration in either granting conditional use permits or granting with conditions, potential conditions. For instance, number one, will the conditional use be injurious to the use enjoyment of other property in the immediate vicinity for the purposes already permitted or to the aesthetic and or scenic values of the vicinity? County staff would maintain that with the recommended conditions in terms of hours of operation and also holding receptions indoors, and the fact that its distance to the nearest residences, the wooded buffering that's also between the nearest residences, and topography that taking together, it would not be injurious to the use and enjoyment of other property in the immediate vicinity. Number two, will the conditional use substantially diminish or impair property values within the neighborhood? And we don't have any evidence that the proposed use would substantially diminish or impair property values. One of the exhibits or some of the public input that was submitted to you in writing, they have offered what they see as information on property values, but I would just note that that's in your packet. And three, would establishment of the conditional use impede the normal and orderly development and improvement of surrounding property for uses permitted in the district? We don't see that it would impede the enjoyment, it would not impede the normal orderly development and improvement of surrounding properties, whether it be residential or agricultural. So with that, county staff is recommending that the Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval with certain conditions that are meant to address the potential land use impacts for neighbors. And those recommendations are in your staff report. There's 9 of them, but I would, for the audience's benefit, I would cite them as including all events, meetings, or functions to be held on the subject property or in any structure on the property. All events, meetings, or functions must end no later than 11 p.m. Number 5, for all events, meetings, or functions to be held as part of this conditional use permit, no amplified sound may be located outdoors except during the performance of a wedding ceremony. Number 6, all amplified sound must end no later than 11 p.m. And those are some of the conditions that are among the 9 recommended conditions in your staff report. Also, I'd like to note we have made part of the record all correspondence that's been received on this and every conditional use permit and all other cases. And that includes several communications with objections and proposed limitations by Mr. Garvey, a letter of concern by Leo Fitz, concerns by Bobby Tracy, letter of support Jim Dearberg, and additional comments by Mr. Garvey, concerns from Brian Gertz, and an acoustical study submitted by the applicant.
Any questions for staff? Seeing none, we'll ask the applicant to come forward. I'll need to swear
Commissioners.
you in. Raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that you will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in these proceedings under the pains and penalties of perjury?
I do.
Please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Robert Brinkman. Our permanent address is Box 344, St. Albans, Missouri, although we spend 90% of our time at this location here.
Go ahead, Mr. Brinkman.
And thank you for letting me present to you tonight. I represent my wife and I. We bought this property about 7 years ago this week, not knowing that of the history of this property. And what I'd like to go through a little bit is give you a little bit of the history of this place. Daniel Boone moved here in the fall of 1799. He was 65 years old. He'd gotten kicked out of Kentucky, and he came out here. His adopted son, Jonathan Bryan, moved here Christmas Day of 1800. The Boones raised 20 children, 10 of their own, 10 adopted. 6 of the adopted children was the Bryan family. Your Bryan Road here is the granddaughter of Jonathan Bryan. She was the first school teacher in St. Charles County. So Jonathan Bryan gets here, and he's going to try to turn some stones on Femme Osage Creek, but he couldn't when the water power. They brought the stones up from Kentucky. So they commenced to build this building, which was a mill. And
Building,
do I switch
yeah,
over?
loaded in the back. There you go.
Oh, there it is. So this mill started being built in 1801. And if you look what was going on in the United States, Jefferson had just become president. Jefferson served for 8 years, didn't get to finish Monticello. We finished this mill before he finished Monticello. And so there's a lot of history going on here. The Boone home actually started 3 or 4 years after that, which was 1804, actually Nathan Boone's property. And so there were 3 pieces of property. They were, it's been written that they're the first Americans this side of the Missouri River, was the Boone family, the Van Bibber property, which you own as a county park now, and this property, the Bryan family. And it wound up being a grist mill until 1880. And so at that time, steam engines came along, and it was a beast of burden mill. Right after that, the Fuchs bought it. The Fuchs are actually buried up on the hill next to Mark Prager's house up there. This is 1929. The farmhouse is fairly new. It's 1843 and was finished in 1850, built by 24 slaves who lived in the basement. This is Kermit Wessler. That's in 1940. He was born in our living room in 1919. His mother was born there in 1894. His grandma lived there during the Civil War, and his great-grandpa built it, and he came over to visit us a couple years ago. Quite a story. The barn, as we refer to it, has really been in disrepair for many, many years. The only reason that barn is still there, or the mill is still there, is because there was a Dr. Thomason came out there about 40 years ago, and he started fixing it up. And then Steve Butler bought it, and there were 18 buildings. The buildings for Boone Village were actually on this property erected at one time, and Steve's traded those buildings to Lindenwood to repair this barn. So a friend of mine was throwing his calendar away the other day, and this was in it. This is the barn in 1988. It was really not taken care of. So this is what we found when we got there, and we gutted the barn. When we bought the property, we did not know the importance of the history of this property, connection with the Boone home. So we've gutted the barn. As many of you know, I'm in the construction business. My wife will tell you we had an unlimited budget, but we exceeded it. And anyhow, we cleaned up the barn and have had events there for 7 years. We have 400 to 500, 600 people a year come there. We've had a lot of bands in the barn, and We use it for apple butter, Christmas parties. We do a lot of charitable stuff there, raising money, St. Louis Police Foundation and other charities to have events there. Everybody loves to come to a barn. There were no doors or windows on this barn for 206 years, mainly because it was a grist mill, and they wanted that dust to get out of there. So we've cleaned it up and would like to convert it and celebrate its use with the rest of the community and the importance of this historical property. We're elated that you all have the Boone home now. And the weddings that they have there, we think will work. They could have receptions at our place, and it would work fine with them. So these are just some flavors of what we have there. The other than the report, and you've read our presentation and then the report of them, we got to thinking about the noise, because I've never not been there. I'm always there. And we've had bands in that barn for 7 years. And so we had a sound study done, which I think you just got this afternoon. It just got completed. And I'm not so concerned with some of the comments that were sent in to the county of the decibels, but I am concerned about my neighbors, because I just bought 600 acres next door, and I'm moving there in a couple months. And so we are not leaving the neighborhood. We will still be there. But I didn't know what the sound levels were at the property lines. I knew that it's 500 feet away before you can get to another piece of property. So that has been presented to you, and basically at 85 decibels, which I think is a high amount for a band that we have had in there. Our bands have been a single speaker or two, cowboy bands, steel guitar or whatever, and they're not that loud. I think the 85 is higher than what we've had in there, but we ran it at 85. And at that, I think the results are about 35 decibels at the property line, which is basically, in summertime, the ambient noise from all the critters out there. So, and we have our sound engineer tonight if you have any further questions on that. So a little bit of the flavor of what we're doing there. We like sharing the property. The best part of owning this property is sharing it with everyone. And we would love to have you come down for apple butter if you'd like sometime.
Any questions for Mr. Brinkman?
Are you proposing that this is on the weekends or just whenever?
Well, I think it's mainly a wedding venue,
Yeah.
and I think they're mostly weekends.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not to say that you wouldn't have a corporate retreat there. We've done all of our strategic planning there. The barn is heated now. It would be air conditioned if we convert it to this. But it would be a de minimis use during the week, I would think.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. Anyone else to speak on behalf of the applicant? If not, we will open the public hearing. Here to speak regarding CUP 18-18. Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that you will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in these proceedings under the pains and penalties of perjury?
Yes.
Please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Dr. Graham Garvey. I live at 11 Sunfish Drive in Defiance, Missouri.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Garvey.
First of all, thank you for the opportunity to speak. And I first want to clarify that I am not here to block the Brinkman's application. I think that it could end up being an asset to the community. However, how the facility is utilized and the limitations that are placed upon it are important to regulate how it is operated and the impacts that will be had on the neighboring community and surrounding area. I've sent in 2 letters in support of this, and I think the first question that I would have is a clarification on the sound study that was just referenced, as that isn't something I've been able to view if it only arrived in your hands today. And the first clarification question I would have is, was that conducted indoors or outdoors? Because I think the limitation of having an outdoor restriction is in line with what one of the limitations I would have is. I've detailed in the 2 supporting letters the reasons why outdoor amplified music would be injurious to my property. And I forgot something. Can you hand me the speaker, please? This speaker cranks out music at approximately 85 decibels. It has a peak that I measured this evening with a CDC-approved device of 93 decibels. So I know outdoor music would be played on something much louder than a small handheld Bluetooth speaker. In regards to the other limitations that I've requested, I have requested that a no alcohol limit be placed upon the property and the event timing before the end of the events. This isn't to say alcohol should not be served at the property, but unfortunately, there is no process in an unincorporated area for us to have a public comment period on how alcohol licenses are granted and reviewed at any venue such as this. The authority for who would get a license would reside with the county registrar, and the county registrar is succeeded in its authority by the county government, specifically the county council, as applied in section 600.100 of the county codes. The county government has to serve as the voice for us local residents for the impacts that would be had by any facility such as this. Prior ways to regulate shouldn't necessarily mean that moving forwards, you don't move forwards with more knowledge. There are rules in place for event venues that limit when alcohol service should be cut off. If you go to Busch Stadium, there's a 7th inning rule. After the 7th inning, you don't get alcohol. Why? Because the people are being turned out into the streets, and those people who've been consuming alcohol would be going home driving drunk. This is a limitation that we need to limit. At a resort, Missouri Statute 311.178 restricts the late-night sale of alcohol only to guests with overnight accommodations. In other words, if you're not staying there, you get cut off earlier than the people who are. Where would these people be going? That idyllic setting, we agree with. That's why we moved there. We love that valley. But Highway F has a 200% higher accident rate than the adjoining Highway 94. The traffic volume that will be incurred on Highway F from these events will be over 40%. At the time that I submitted my first letter, I didn't have the accurate number, and that number went up for the number of cars that could be allowed to go onto Highway F. I can detail for you my research into how understanding and estimating that traffic impact. The second limitation that I've requested is a no fireworks display or sky lanterns for this facility should be allowed. That beautiful wooded setting that was described by Mr. Brinkman, we agree. We adjoin the property to the north, and our home is located 1,700 feet away. That is approximate. I don't have the exact rounding error. Fireworks are a common event at weddings and celebrations. Why do I know this? Well, I did some digging, and I found out that Chandler Hill Vineyards has received 106 permits for fireworks displays in the last 3 years. When I did my own analysis, because I didn't want to come and just object to object, I wanted to understand what the risks really would be. When I dug into it, I found that there was really no safe place for the Brinkmans to host a large fireworks display. And when I reviewed my concerns with the local fire chief, he agreed that it would be prudent to submit a statement, which is included in the letters that I sent, that request limitations of fireworks at this facility. Moving on to my third concern, which is around no firearms policy, so that I will be brief and you don't have to listen to me the entire time. I want to say that I agree with what Brian Gortz, who is also here, will be speaking to you about regarding a no firearms policy being applied as a limitation to this facility. The fourth concern I have is a no amplified music rule, which is included in the limitations, but I feel it is important that the county understand exactly how music would impact a home located even through the buffering of the trees. And I put buffering in quotes there because on the Missouri.MoDOT Soundwall website, when asked why don't they use trees and berms to buffer the sound, the site simply states that landscaping or berms for sound abatement normally don't work well in most areas. In fact, in my learning and digging into this subject matter, I found that large traffic studies have been done to understand the impacts of noise and how you abate them. Real estate agencies have conducted studies to understand what the impacts of noise are on properties. And there is a consistency in the findings. Number one, trees don't work as effective buffers. In fact, trees can, with the right soil type, have an amplifying effect on the sound. In other words, music travels faster, farther, louder than it should when you have a hard soil type. Go stick a shovel in that soil at our house. It is rock hard. It is a hard soil. That indicates that there will be no limited noise abatement from any tree buffer, even our woods, for almost 1,000 feet, let alone to a property line. These large research studies into noise impacts on property value were also insightful. When I dug into it, what I found is that the number varied, but there was consistency among the studies in that there are a negative impact to property values, and it can be quantified. There's great calculators online that you can go to, plug in some numbers, and understand. So even a modest sound increase to our property, if I estimate a 10 decibel noise increase from outdoor amplified music that would arrive at our property line, could, or any of the neighbors' property lines, could result in as much as a 2% decrease in value, slightly higher on some calculators, slightly lower on others. That doesn't sound like a lot of money, but 2% is hard-earned money for us. And I would appreciate this be contemplated if any requests are made to remove the limitations on outdoor amplified music. With that, I thank you for your time.
Any questions, Mr. Garvey? By the way, for the record, Mr. Brinkman and I graduated from college 48 years ago, and I noticed you took a picture. This was the first time in 48 years that our paths have crossed.
Okay?
Thank you. Any questions? Anyone else here to speak regarding CUP 18-18? Yes, ma'am.
Speaker cards too.
Oh, yeah, I'll make it. Please raise your, do you solemnly swear or affirm that you will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in these proceedings under the pains and penalties of perjury?
I do.
Please state your name and address for the
My
record.
name's Kathleen Schaefer, and I live at 2201 Highway F,
Go ahead, Ms. Schaefer.
right up from the property. We know the Brinkmans, and they're wonderful people, and I'm not here to say that, you know, I'm object to the whole thing, but, you know, this is our investment in this property, and we're concerned about the property value. Therefore, we have a real concern about the traffic. You know, it's a lot of cars thinking, that's going right by our house. You know, and we're, you know, if we have to leave or go anywhere, yeah, I'm just wondering if the state would lower the speed limit or do something when all these cars come out of there at night. So I think that's something they should consider. The other thing are the fireworks. We really, we would object to fireworks. That would be, there's been fireworks down there. I don't know who's done it. It could be some other neighbor, but it, you know, it's kind of dangerous. We have a lot of trees, and the noise is not good. So that's my concern.
Okay.
I'd like you to please consider that.
Any questions for Ms. Schaefer? Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Anyone else care to speak? Do you solemnly swear or affirm that you will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in these proceedings under the pains and penalties of perjury?
Yes, I do.
Please state your name and address for the record.
Brian Gertz, 6 Gaston's Trail Court, Defiance, Missouri.
Go ahead, Mr. Kurtz.
I am also a Callaway Valley resident, the subdivision that joins the Brinkman property. As Graham stated earlier, I share all his concerns. I won't repeat those, but 3 in particular I wanted to expand on a little bit. All 3 of these, I live a little further from the site than Graham does. So all 3 of these primarily concern safety of our residents, safety of my family. The primary concern is that of a dramatic increase in potentially impaired drivers coming down Highway F, particularly as they pass the Callaway Valley subdivision entrance. That subdivision is almost 200 homes and growing, and there's a single entrance that exits onto Highway F. Unfortunately, that entrance coming from the Brinkman property follows a left turn, right turn as it comes up a hill. It's a difficult area to navigate, and is actually very easy to even I have passed the Callaway Valley entrance when I'm not paying attention, because you come up that hill and you're already through there at 55 miles an hour. So the concern is if these events are held in evenings and alcohol is served, people that are unfamiliar with those roads could be heading towards Highway 94, or they could be heading towards New Melle. If they live anywhere in the O'Fallon, Wentzville, Troy, Warrenton, even northern St. Charles area, they'd be coming our direction. In the last 4 years, according to the Missouri State Highway Patrol website, there have been 10 accidents at or directly adjacent to the entrance to our subdivision where it meets Highway F. These accidents have included some severe injuries, multiple rollovers. One school bus rolled into a ditch, one dump truck rolled into a ditch. And these were during daylight hours. And these are people who drive for a living and know these roads, drive them every day. So my concern is people unfamiliar with those roads, especially after drinking, endangers my family and my neighbors and friends. So in response to that, I would offer a provision that any parties or events where alcohol is served, that an off-duty police officer or someone of the like would be on site to kind of screen guests as they leave, and if they feel they're unable to drive, offer them some other sort of transportation, whether it be a taxi, a Lyft, or Uber ride, or perhaps the Brinkmans could have a shuttle on site to help people shuttle their vehicles home, or even a ride with another friend. This is not to harass guests, but just to keep them safe as well as the other neighbors and residents in the area safe. My second concern is with the fireworks, as we've heard. That area is so steep and the terrain is so rocky that fires spread very quickly out there. In fact, this last spring, we had 3 forest fires in the New Melle area. And 2 of those forest fires were started by residential fireworks, just somebody shooting in their own yard. The problem is some of these fires can go undetected and they spread because of the way the wind travels through the valleys. You don't see the smoke right away, and next thing you know, there's a half acre or an acre burning. One of these fires burned between 4 and 5 acres, and it was 2 houses down the street from me. And I was out working my yard all day, never saw any smoke. The wind was blowing the other direction. By the time 4 different fire departments arrived, they said they could see that smoke from Highway 40 and Highway 70, which is miles and miles away. So it just shows how quickly these can get out of control, and that was just from somebody burning trash unattended, and wind blew the wrong way and it spread. Then it ended up damaging a home and destroying an entire neighbor's lot. So with a commercial grade fireworks display, the height of the shells and the detonation and the travel of the embers is much more significant and can easily spread even undetected from the source of the display. So I prefer that fireworks not be permitted, but if fireworks are permitted, I would suggest having some sort of a water truck and a trained firefighter on site during the display so that if anything does get out of control, they can try and get water to it or potentially call in help sooner. The difficulty with the fire that was on our street was even once the 4 different fire departments were there, they couldn't get water back to the fire. The terrain was too steep, even with an ATV with a tank on it, which is not much water, it couldn't be contained or couldn't be put out, extinguished with water. My third concern is also with firearms. It's such a beautiful area, and it's all wooded. When you're standing out there, you kind of feel like you're in the middle of nowhere. So if guests were to have firearms and decide to shoot at a tree or shoot at, a rock hillside or target of any type, they don't realize that there are hundreds of homes just on the other side of those trees. They wouldn't be able to see them, especially during summer months, but the bullets can easily travel that far. So I would request a strict firearms prohibition on the site. That's all I have. Thank you.
Any questions? No? Okay. Anyone else care to speak? Please wait your. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that you will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in these proceedings under the pains and penalties of perjury?
I do, sir.
Please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Diana Pratt. I live at 2162 Highway F, directly across from Kathy Schaefer.
Okay, go ahead, Ms.
Just right down the road from the
Pratt, is that correct?
PRATT.
Go ahead, Ms. Pratt.
Okay. Well, my concern is the traffic. I want to ask any of you, have you ever driven on Highway F? Do you know about Highway F? Do you know how small it is? And there's no shoulders. And basically, we moved out there in 1976. So I've lived out there for a long time. And on weekends, when a lot of this is going on, there are bike rallies and motorcycle rallies and car rallies, and everybody that's coming to the Boone home, and people who are coming to the wineries, and people who are just sightseeing. And I mean, that road is just filled with traffic. So this is just going to make it worse. Also, where the house is, where on their property, where the house sits, right out in front of the house, there is a blind curve there on Highway F that you cannot see around at all. And so, I mean, I'm concerned about the drunk drivers as well, but I'm just concerned about the overall traffic thing. I mean, we're already swamped with traffic, and this is just going to make it a lot worse.
Anything else?
That's my main concern is and no fireworks. Last New Melly Fire Department actually has a time of year when you're not allowed to burn anything. If you want to burn something, you have to get a permit. And then the last couple of years, we've had severe drought. And so you can't do fireworks when you're having a severe drought out there. And this area is all hills. Highway F is just like a goat track through two hills, is what it is. And then also on my side, because I'm on the other side, the valley goes down there. So any sounds get repeated down through the valley, so the noise is worse on that side simply because of the valley. So that's basically what I wanted to say.
Any questions for Ms. Pratt? Great, thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Anyone else? No, come ahead. Oh. I thought you'd be a gentleman, Arnie.
He tried to. He tried.
I'm willing to wait. Do you want to speak or do you want? Okay, thanks.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that you will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in these proceedings under the pains and penalties of perjury?
Yes, I do.
Please state your name and address for the record.
Yes, my name is Arnie C. A.C. Dienoff, public advocate and county resident, and my mailing address is P.O. Box 1535, and that's in O'Fallon. First of all, I'd like to make a matter of the public record is the applicant said that he filed the noise study today. That really didn't give the other people in the audience and the residents ample time to review this information, and I don't even know if county staff reviewed the information, let alone the commissioners, that you could read, understand, and digest the information to ask the appropriate questions. It did not get posted to the county's website, and I have some problems with disclosure to the public and compliance with the state sunshine law, chapter 610 of the Missouri Revised State Statutes. Another thing I'd like to make a matter of public record is the parking. 52 spots, is that really enough for this venue? When you take 200 people, mostly when you go to a wedding, the weddings that I've attended, usually the people that come in cars are two, and that's a couple. So you usually have 2 people per car. So in my opinion, the 52 falls way short of what's needed, and I would really recommend that we go to a higher amount of at least 75, if not 100 cars. Conditions of the county code are very clear on outdoor audible equipment. As in past CUPs, conditional use permits, you've either required or it's been voluntarily put up by the applicant that they install Geiger meters within a certain footage from adjoining property owners. So in this case, I ask that you have the applicant, as one of the conditions, install Geiger meters. They're reasonably affordable, they're not very expensive, and would assure everybody's mind and protect property values. It collects the data sound from the facility and where the amplified sound is coming from. Hours of operation. I believe that other conditional use permits in the past year and a half for wineries and venues, you've limited to 10 o'clock p.m. But in this instance, I guess the applicant wanted 11 p.m. So I want to make sure that all these venues, wineries, wedding venues, are being treated on the same even keel playing field, and that we're not treating one development or one applicant better or less than the other. Number 3, access and brush. It's hard to fight fires. I think that's clear to the terrain. I think we've all traveled this area, this southern part of the county, and we know what the terrain is like. It's a lot of valleys and hills. It's very picturesque and beautiful. In a letter dated January 7th of 2018, the New Melly Fire Protection District Fire Chief Rick Massey has some concerns with fireworks. No one in this room is a firefighter or involved in the fire protection districts, so I think this commission needs to rely on the professionals. Chief Massey is a full-time fire chief and has dedicated his life to the fire profession. In his letter dated January 7th, Chief Massey says that he wants to limit any fireworks to 1.4 G or Class C of that type of ability of a firework. So I would ask that you put that as one of the conditions on the applicant. This increasing neighborhood of wineries and wedding venues has increased the need for public safety and needs the increased patrols of our county police department. I'm asking that the Planning and Zoning Commission and the staff, the community development director is off to my right, that they send a memo to Chief Dave Todd that we need a dedicated patrol team in this neighborhood from basically March through October, November to ensure the utmost of public safety. The commission must adhere to conditional conditions and place responsible conditions on the Brinkman application that they have on other wedding and winery venues. You need to make sure that that's done. The purpose of a conditional use permit, a CUP, is to ensure the protection of all adjoining properties. The integrity and the spirit of the neighborhood need to be the utmost priority of this commission. It's to ensure the highest yield of property value, not only for the Brinkmans, but for anybody that adjoins their property. They should be treated the same as this applicant, and to make sure that everybody's property values don't decrease. It's to adhere to, the conditional use permit is to adhere to the piece following the codified county ordinances. The CUP is to allow for the fair enjoyment and use of one's property, both the Brinkmans and the adjoining property owners. And it places and adheres to the same conditions. Number one, on the person load on the property, and I think you limit that to 200. Reasonable hours of operation, which I think is more like 10 o'clock rather than the 11 o'clock that's in the application. Noise abatement from other adjoining properties. I'm sorry, noise abatement for the neighbors from this property. And to cut down on lighting pollution. Traffic is a concern, and I'm sure MoDOT will probably address some of those entrances and exits to ensure public safety. And the most priority of this commission is, of course, public health, safety, and welfare of not just the Brinkmans, but all the people who live in this neighborhood. And I think that's your first and priority. I think it's in your heart. And I think you just need to listen to everybody with an open mind. But I think Chief Massey's recommendation really needs to be followed here as a condition. And I think you placed other limitations on other wedding venues and wineries in this neighborhood in terms of the time limit and in terms of certain noise constraints that I don't see here that I do not see in the Brinkman application. So thank you.
Anyone else? You solemnly swear or affirm that you will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in these proceedings under the pains and penalties of perjury.
Yes.
Please state your name and address for the record.
Louise Pratt, 2162 Highway F, Defiance, Missouri.
Okay, go ahead.
63341.
Would you mind pulling the microphone a little closer? Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
We live fairly close to the home. When we sit at our dining room table, we see the front, we see the barn, we see the house. It's right there. I do want to say, it was mentioned about the sound. It does reverberate throughout the valley. You can hear noises. Like when we have lightning and thunder, you can keep hearing it throughout the valley. So I worry about what kind of, what sound would reverberate from the music that they might have, especially if they do the outdoor venue, which has been brought up. It's 26 acres of a 104-acre tract. So I wondered, I understand it's only going to address the 26 acres, but I wondered if the owners have any future plans for the rest of the 104-acre tract of land. I wanted to know what actions the owners would take to prevent intoxicated drivers from driving home from their facility, particularly on our road, because it has no shoulders and blind corners and curves. Also, the increased traffic, which I think has already been discussed. And the parking lot, I guess it's going to be made of gravel, and it sounds like it's going to be more towards the front of the property. I mean, you'll be able to see it. So that will affect the aesthetic value and the scenic value of, people driving through. A lot of people like to drive through, and obviously we live there. I did think the 11 o'clock time PM was too late in the evening. And I also had, with Mr. Clary, asking, mentioning when you would be holding the events, if it was going to be weekdays or weekends. I hope that some of that is clearly stipulated when you make your recommendations. I agree that the fireworks should not be allowed, the sound echoing through the valley. And also, I wanted what class the fire department is in New Melle. I mean, it used to be volunteer for a long, long time. It's not volunteer anymore. I think there are some people that are on staff there. But I know that that's an issue, and it's not like we have fire hydrants that you can, get to water easily. I wondered about the water that will, having this use of water on the property, how it will affect the wells of the neighboring properties, and how sewage would affect the neighboring properties, noise pollution, air pollution, the roadways handling all the additional guests, especially those that are potentially intoxicated.
Mrs. Pratt,
Yes.
how far do you live from the property exactly?
I don't know the exact, I just know that I can sit there and see it. It's not
Okay,
that.
so
I noticed
he's
that
had
none
some
of our-
events there before that sound like they're work events. Have you heard any noise from them during those times?
Yes, we've heard noise from events and everything, but we want to be neighborly and everything else, so no one ever
Yeah, I just wanted
says
to make sure if
anything.
you were hearing it, that's all.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I just hope that when the recommendation, I hope that there's specific parameters as to how many events, the days, time, size, measures to prevent intoxicated drivers, and about the fireworks. I hope that all gets addressed in your recommendations. I didn't know, does this open the door for things that may happen later on with the rest of the property, or? No,
This
just
only
this,
covers
for this
the 25
26-acre property, and for weddings and other corporate events.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions from Ms. Pratt? Okay, thank you. Anyone else care to speak? You solemnly swear or affirm that you will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in these proceedings under the pains and penalties of perjury?
Yes.
Please state your name and address for the record.
Yeah, my name is Brian Taylor. I live at 23 Sunfish Drive, Defiance, Missouri.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Taylor.
Thank you. Well, first off, thank you for the opportunity to come and speak today. I don't know the Brinkmans personally, but I do know some people, I have some friends that know them, and I know they speak fairly highly of them, and I know that they've got a beautiful property down there. We moved into this house out to the Defiance area in May of last year. Had been looking out there for a couple of years, specifically for the peace and the quiet. We were living in Weldon Springs, part of that in the neighborhood, and wanted that expanse in that land. My house backs up directly to, there's a property between my house and the Brinkmans, but if you look straight back, I'm looking right over the top of the barn from my deck. And so, and my master bedroom is on the back side of the house. So my biggest concern, one of my largest concerns is of course the noise and the potential disturbance that it might create as far as our enjoyment of our property, especially if we're trying to sleep at night on if it's 10 or 11 o'clock on a Saturday or Friday night, or a bigger concern would really be more during the week. So the noise is a real concern of mine. And it sounds to me like they've done the study. I'd be curious to see what that, see that study. And if there's not outdoor amplification, if that's not removed from the requirement, that they're not allowed to do that, I think it would probably be okay, with that. The other two major concerns, number one is the fireworks as well, just like everybody else had stated. Actually, the day I was moving into my house, a fire occurred in the neighborhood. I ended up having to help put the thing out. It kind of scared me a little bit to think how fast this thing, moved through the brush. So obviously that would be a concern of mine too, that there were any fireworks given the location of my property, to this facility. And then the last one is another one that everybody else has echoed as well, and that's around the traffic and the intoxication, the potential for intoxicated drivers. I've got young children, teenagers who are driving. Those are windy roads. I totaled my car just a few weeks ago hitting a deer out in that area. There's a lot of wildlife moving around, and if you're not familiar with that area, those roads can be really dangerous. And I would anticipate there's going to be a lot of people coming out there that are not familiar with that area, not familiar with those roads. And if you add alcohol, then obviously that raises another level of concern with those drivers in that area. So those are my main concerns.
Any questions for Mr. Taylor? Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Anyone else? Anyone else wishing to speak during the public hearing? If not, the public hearing is now closed, and we would ask the applicant to come back.
Good evening, Commissioners.
Here, I'll just do you both at the same time. Yeah. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that you tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in these proceedings under the pains and penalties of perjury?
I do.
Please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Drew Weber with the Hamilton Weber Law Firm, and my address is right next door, 200 North 3rd Street, St. Charles, Missouri, 63301.
Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, hi. My name is Gary Brown with the McClure Engineering. Our office address is 1000 Clark Avenue, downtown St. Louis.
Okay.
The Brinkmans asked us to handle their rebuttal. Gary here to talk about some of the sound questions that people had, and then I was going to talk about some of the other issues that were raised. And I think there's some concerns that are maybe misplaced and some misconceptions. There was never any intent to have this venue be like Chandler Hill, where there's fireworks, every night from May to September. And so after hearing all the concerns, the Brinkman said, hey, we're fine with not having fireworks. That wasn't really part of the plan anyways, so they're fine with not having fireworks. that's not a big concern to them. Another thing is the parking. So Mr. Meyer said that under the code, the amount of parking spaces, I think, was 52 that are required. But that's not the amount of spaces that are on the property or proposed for the property. The proposed amount is 171, which I think certainly meets any sort of minimum reasonableness requirement for a venue of this size. And a lot of people are concerned about traffic. Well, Mr. Brinkman informed me that Highway F is actually getting shoulders in 2020, and the county, as you know, has the Boone home down the road, and we don't know of any traffic problem emanating from events that are held at the Boone home, and there's obviously a lot of special events that are held there. And so with no sort of negative effect from that very similar use in the same area, we don't anticipate that there would be a similar negative effect here. The last kind of misconception maybe is about the outdoor music. The only proposed outdoor music is during a ceremony. So if someone were to have a ceremony on the property, and if the ceremony were to be outside, then there may be a harp player or a pianist or something like that. But any sort of other music, especially associated with the reception, is all going to be indoor. And so that's what the sound study was based off, which I'll let Gary talk about. But there's not going to be any band outside. There's not going to be any sort of amplified music outside other than during wedding ceremonies, which, as you know, are short, and there won't be as many wedding ceremonies as there are receptions on the property. And before I turn it over to Gary, the last thing that I want to talk about is consistency, which was mentioned. And I know, Mr. Klinghammer, you mentioned that in previous conditional use permits that I had for this same use. And so when I was here last year for Defiance Ridge Vineyards, one of the concerns was end time, right? And so 11 o'clock is what was set for the time to end the amplified music, which actually there is outdoor amplified music that's allowed in certain circumstances on that property. And then 11 o'clock to end event time as well. And then that was carried over when Balducci applied for their conditional use permit for wedding events. And there may have been others in the intervening time frame too. And so what staff has proposed for this venue is consistent with those. So we have kind of the same fair treatment that's proposed for this facility as for those other ones. And some of the other facilities out in that area that do host weddings have residences a lot closer than here. I mean, a lot of these residents live about a half mile away from this property. I mean, if you look at Balducci, there's a few residences that are 800 feet away. Sugar Creek has residences that are 600 feet away. Good News Brewing down there has residences that are across the street. So there's a lot more separation on this venue compared to almost any other venue, frankly, that offers weddings or other kind of private parties out there. And then, Gary, would you maybe address some of the
Well,
music
actually, I have
concerns?
some questions for you first. Mr.
Okay.
Wilbur. They talked about firearms on the property. Are they planning to have a bunch of people on there with guns and shooting and?
The only kind of gun wedding might be a shotgun wedding. But I don't think there's any proposal to have, firearms shot off during receptions.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know if that's some sort of popular thing in receptions now, but there's no plans.
Would they
for
be
that.
okay with it as a restriction that no firearms are at these weddings, or? I mean, there's people that's worried about it. I'm trying to address their
Right.
concerns too. I mean, I can't imagine you're doing that, but.
Right, yeah,
same
that's
time.
not part of the proposal, so I
Okay.
mean, they would agree to not have people shoot off firearms at wedding receptions.
And then alcohol. Alcohol is always a problem at these venues, and everybody worries about it, and it's a concern of everybody when there's alcohol involved on roads like F and 94 and D and all those roads. So, I mean, is there anything they can do about the alcohol consumption that's going to be at these events?
Well, I think we can point to what's happening nearby. I mean, I don't know of any sort of problem that is emanating from alcohol being served at events at the Daniel Boone home, right? And so that's the same highway, it's the same area. So I'd anticipate a similar scenario here.
Okay.
Will Mr. Brinkman be applying for a liquor license, or will they rely on a caterer who has a liquor license? Please come forward to the microphone.
Yeah. That's a good question. I like that.
The answer to that is, I don't know. We do not plan on, we're going to live right next door there with our 600 acres and still be around our neighbors who got up and spoke tonight. We're using an event planner that is going to run this, and I don't know how they get the ability to sell liquor there, if it's through the caterer or if we have to apply for one.
Usually cater, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, most of it is with a caterer's
Through the caterer.
license.
That's probably how she'll do it then.
Who would be liable under Dram Shop.
Yeah.
Yep. We'll carry dram insurance too.
Yep. Okay.
Is there a potential in the future for having outdoor weddings there in a pavilion type of the atmosphere?
Yeah, actually, one of the photos in your packet, I built the altar. It's those twigs in the woods. There's a little pergola up there, and we had our niece's wedding up there. So, yeah, I think there will be outdoor weddings there.
Weddings.
With the receptions being outdoors also?
Well, they're outdoors and indoors. Nice weather, people like to stand around the barn on the outside, yeah. But all the music will be inside, amplified
The
music.
venue's going to be inside for the reception. That's where the main reception's going to be, right? Correct?
Well,
Are you gonna have
this
them
time of
outdoor?
year,
I think
they-
that's what he wants to know, is are you going to have receptions outside?
Well, there'll be, I think you saw how the tables are set up sometimes. Well, sometimes we'll put a table all the way around the barn that seats 200 people. So some seating will be out there. This time of year, of course, it'll all be inside.
Okay.
But absolutely, it's part of the ambience of that property is being outside and enjoying the,
But any amplified sound would be inside.
that's correct. We would never allow amplified outside.
Yeah.
One of the requirements that we put on the Stone House, which is the old Cottle Mansion House, they built an event barn adjacent to the mansion house. One of the requirements that we put on that was that the doors had to remain closed while there was amplified music, so that we don't have doors open and affecting the neighborhood. Is that something that you could agree to?
I don't believe so. I think you're going to find out that with the doors open, that we're well below the standards of the county. There are certain days of the year in June and that you would not want to be inside that barn when it's nice outside with the music going.
Is that one where they're closer to the residents? Or
That was the one
something?
off McClay,
Yeah.
yeah, where they were just
Yeah, right next.
right next door.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr.
I have a-
Brinkman?
Mr. Brinkman, you obviously have had much success in your career in the construction industry. I know that because your company built the shopping center that I have my business in. Why in the world would you want to go in the hospitality business at this age?
You know what, when we moved there, we started thinking about this 10 years ago. My grandma was born over behind Schimmermeyer Quarry in 1896. The property that we just acquired next door was owned by the Boone in 1804. In 1904, it was her grandpa's property. We want to retire there, and we have a lot of money invested in this property, and we see the joy that people see coming out there. And I gave you the short version tonight. I could give you a 25-minute version on the history of that property, how the last skirmish of the War of 1812 was held on that property, and a lot of cool history of that area. And we plan on having that all published in part of the event so that people can really enjoy this. We're the only state that does not celebrate that Daniel Boone lived here. If he stopped for dinner in Louisiana, there you got a sign up. And so we're happy that you're running the Boone home now, and we just want to keep that valley the way it is. To answer one of the lady's questions, what are we going to do with the rest of the property? I'm meeting with the Ozark Land Trust this Friday, and we're putting deed restrictions on that property. We could build 5-acre lots right up to Sunfish Drive. We're not going to do that. We're going to put that in a land trust. I've talked to Jim Dearberg, who you got a letter from. He says he's not going to put us in a land trust. He's just never going to sell it. And we'd like to see that valley the same way as it is now, 200 years from now. We will do that also on our remaining 500 acres adjacent to the property.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. Mr. Brown?
Yes. So I would like to, I have a quick PowerPoint. I can stand up here and talk about noise all day. I can show some pictures. So if we can do a quick little PowerPoint, does it plug in here?
That's a good question.
Robert?
Open up.
Somebody's
Right here?
coming out.
Well, underneath here.
Sorry.
Here comes the techie people.
Yeah.
Where's the students? My 3-year-old, what are you talking about?
Brian knows.
And then just click on the right side to go through.
All right, well,
Me too. Oh, she could wait. Take a cab.
Okay.
You got it up there. It's
There
up
we
there.
go.
okay, there we go. All right, so I was commissioned by Mr. Brinkman to do a sound study, and we kind of conducted that study over the last 2 weeks. Please realize we are in the middle of winter. The sound does travel a lot better at this time of year, so this is the worst-case scenario that you can have in the winter. Other seasons, the time of the year, the sound doesn't travel as good. When it gets warmer, it travels up. When it's colder, it stays closer to the ground and travels through the valley, as some of the residents have noticed. I realize some of these residents haven't had a chance to look at the report. I know you guys probably haven't had a lot of chance, so I'd like to briefly go over what our study entailed and what I found. So we conducted the study over the last 2 weeks. One of the main things was try to establish what the current background sound or ambient sound level is in this valley. Then we calculated those sound levels from the barn on amplified music by placing some speakers inside the barn and we played various scenarios. We played strictly white noise that just made a bunch of noise. And then we played AC/DC to kind of rock the valley. So we played it in a normal listening condition. So there's been a lot of value to, well, what's it playing at and what level, and I'll kind of get into that later. But we played it inside the barn to a normal level of where you can still have a conversation of about 85 dB. That's a sound power. So a sound power, easily explained, is when you got a furnace in your house, the amount of heat in that furnace is the power that puts the temperature into the house. So it's basically the sound would be the sound pressure at a distance inside that house at one of the registers. So that's the kind of difference between sound power, its amount of power or energy coming out of the speakers, and filling up that room, the barn, and then playing that through that. And we had the doors open. We played different scenarios with the barn doors open, barn doors closed. But our primary focus was to find out what was coming through those barn doors if we left it open. And we put the speakers in a normal position where a band would play. And then we'll include that up with the summary of everything. So we saw the property. So I did some, there was a couple locations on the west side that we kind of looked at. So we put a sound monitor up towards the house, up on the back corner, up towards the north, to kind of give it away from Highway F. And then we did a sound monitor about 100 feet off the highway, just to try to, up by the barn. So that try to give us an idea of what the background sound level from the road and from what the area is inside. So this is one of our graphs that we took. We took 2 locations. So this is location 1. And the important thing in here is to kind of look at the blue dots. They're pretty consistent along the bottom. That is our background. That is 90% of the sound that's in that area. And it's really consistent that the sound is right there at 35. Please note that this monitor only goes down to 35. The other equipment we used will show that we measured down to 30 on the background. So that is extremely quiet out there. So it is a quiet environment out there. And the blue line that goes through is your LEQ. So between the green triangle and the blue dot is 80% of the sound in continuously for an hour. So you can kind of follow the graph, how the traffic flows through the area, dies off at night, and then picks back up in the morning. This is location 2, where we was further back towards the house. And you can see in the night there, between the 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock hours, the blue dot and the dark blue line are almost identical to each other. So that indicates that, yes, it is very quiet. This is extremely quiet, and you can see a little bit of the roadway coming into a play, and even back that far, it gets up to about 45 on a max level. Now, the red dots is just instantaneous. That could be the wind, that could be a loud noise coming through the road, or anything like that. So that kind of established our backgrounds, and they're between 30 and 35 dBA, which is really quiet. So when we cranked up the music at 85, is the top blue line. That's inside the barn. To the west property line, we showed it earlier, we got a level of about 38 at the property line. You can see when a car passes, the sound does get up to about 60. And then there's that car event that happens. So we've done a acoustical model of playing this 85 dBA, and the very green shaded area is a 30 dB level. So that sound will travel out to those points of 30 dB till it meshes back into the background, where you really can't hear it. Now, the sound out there, it does travel, as you can see, to the left a lot easier than it does up towards the hill. Now, there was a comment made about trees. That is absolutely true. Trees do not provide very good attenuation until you get 100 to 200 feet of dense populated trees and brush. And then you get about a 1 or 2 dB attenuation as you move through the valley. So up through the north, it does attenuate every 200 feet, another additional 1 or 2 dB. Any questions on that? So we got a sound level about 38 at that west property line. It's hard to see it on here, but if I can blow it up on the other one, you can see where that west property line is. So running through some county noise ordinance, for residential areas from 8 to 10, or from 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. at night, which is really our critical time at night, so if people's trying to sleep, they don't get impacted. 50 dBA is what the county suggests for a continuous noise source. You should not exceed that. I have added some various common noise sources that are typical. And just to run through here, so the urban area or the agricultural areas do have a background that are very soft and in between 40 and 30 dBA. So a car at 100, basically going by on a highway at about 90 feet will get up to about 60 dB. And that's what we've seen from our background sound levels. So that just kind of gives you an idea of where sound falls and typical levels that occur. Now you guys have the full report that explains my findings and all the information that was obtained during this study. Any questions?
Questions for Mr. Brown?
Yeah, I've got a couple of them. Okay, so in a room of 200 people talking, what is the decibel level on something like that?
So yeah, so a room with that many people, it'll be in the range of about 70 to about 80.
Okay. And does music that's at a higher decibel level have an additive decibel level to the background of people talking, or is it whatever the highest sound is the one that's amplified?
That's a great question. So what occurs is, so if you have background music playing at 70, and we're all having a conversation, and you add sound to that at, say, at 80. So everybody has a cocktail effect of the sound increasing to everybody's raising their voice. So the most, if everybody starts talking at 80 and you got the music playing at 80, the most it'll add to the situation is 3 dB inside that room. So when you add two sources together, the most it adds is the highest level. If they're both equal, it'll add 3 dB to that level. So if you got two sources at 80 dB, you only add 3 dB.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Brown?
No, sorry.
All right.
I do have a question for Mr. Brinkman, though.
Yes.
If you want to come up. noise seems to be one of the biggest concerns, it looks like, traffic and all that stuff, things you can't do too much about, but the noise you can. Are you willing to have a restriction that says no amplified music other than during the ceremony outdoors?
Well, we are willing to say you cannot have amplified music outdoors.
At all?
Well, during the ceremony, we'd like to be able to have it. My wedding was outdoors, and I had a little B3
Yeah, that's what I mean.
organ brought.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying,
yeah.
that would be, would that be okay if we had that as a restriction?
I think it's
Yeah.
in.
Is it? I don't think it does. It doesn't actually say that.
I don't think it says that. We're agreeable not to have a band outside the barn.
It just says
And I
amplified
can
music
tell you, we've
before
had
11 PM.
No, this next one.
50.
Number 5. Number 5 says, "For all events, meetings, or functions to be held as part of this conditional use permit, no amplified sound may be located outdoors except during the performance of a wedding
All right,
ceremony."
I got
It's
it.
already in
All right.
there.
That's
Yeah.
correct.
Great. All right.
And we've had lots of parties in there. It doesn't get to 80, 85 dB.
Yeah.
You-
I just wanted to make sure that people were comfortable in your neighborhood, they know, and that it's not going to be outside.
Mr. Brinkman, I had a couple questions too. Is your property on a private well, or is it public water?
No, it's all private.
Okay. And I guess a septic system of some sort of...
Yes, we put a septic system in the barn. Sandy May put the eyeball on us when we did that, and it meets the requirement for the event center.
That number of people?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
You done? Yeah, I think the point was, and I wasn't sure it was clear, is that even at the 80, 85 dB, even at this time of the year with the doors open, it gets down to 35, which is basically the ambient noise there at the property lines. And I think that's in the report.
Yes, yeah, and correct. And going back to the levels, there was one note I wanted to make according to OSHA. 85 is typically.
Get on the microphone.
I'm sorry. Yeah, so according to OSHA, 85 is the beginning point that they require that you should be limited to noise levels. As you move up the scale of sound level, that limit gets lower and lower to the amount of duration of sound you can take. So I do have a chart that would illustrate this, if I can find it here real quick. So on permissible, does this thing work here?
I don't think that's going to be all we see.
Yeah.
Sorry.
that's, there's something to zoom in.
You might just want to read it too.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're zooming it in.
I don't think that's going to help either.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's not too
it
bad.
doesn't help a lot,
That's not
does
too
it?
bad.
So anyway, so looking at, so 85 is when they, above 85 is when they require that you have a hearing conservation program. So when you start getting into 90, you can only be exposed to that sound level for 8 hours. And then as you move up higher in the categories of sound, if you look at 105 or 110, you can only be exposed to that kind of level for half an hour. So that would be actually painful to sit in there. So we try to play it at a comfortable level that it's still loud, that most people would still be able to enjoy it. So that's just a brief note on noise exposure and noise levels, just to clarify
Any other
that.
questions for Mr. Brown? Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We'll just bring this back to the commission. Any, no, we're public, nothing after the public hearing and the respondent comes back. So we're back to the commission for discussion. Anyone have any questions of staff, comments?
Well, I have some comments, but I don't know if you want to wait for people to have questions here first.
Any questions for staff? Go ahead, Mr. Twitter.
Okay. Yeah, I think that there are several items that have been brought up that I do think that we need to amend the already listed conditions. Some of them have already been mentioned. No fireworks or firearms associated with the events. I think that we have put a restriction time on Thursday, Sunday through Thursday on other type of venues at 10 p.m. And I would suggest too that all amplified sound be stopped 1 hour before whatever the closure time is, so 10 o'clock on weekends and 9 o'clock on the weekdays, in addition to the ones that are already mentioned here.
Can staff comment on that? Have we done that before? Anybody you can recall?
For hours of operation,
During the week, change it to 10?
yeah, there has been
Yeah, we have.
at least one conditional use permit where there were different hours for weekdays and weekends, essentially. So it has been done before. We try to work with the applicant to see if hours will work for them within their business model. If I get back up for just a second, one of the reasons that we proposed hours in the first place is that we want to see what the proposal is of the applicant, and then much of the time we'd be better off kind of memorializing those representations that they have. You know, someone could say conceivably that, oh, we promise that we'll never operate past 9 p.m., and without some sort of condition to memorialize that, you know, someone could go later. So we try to work with them to find out what hours work within their business model, and then try to put that down on paper. And in this case, we talked to them about 11 p.m., and they were agreeable to that. So one recommendation I would have is if you're proposing different hours, you might want to speak with the applicant to see if that would work within their business plans.
Okay.
Would that work for you, the weekday?
No, 10 o'clock would not work.
On weekdays?
On weekdays?
Yeah, that's what I was saying, Sunday through Thursday.
You might as well come up here.
Come
Yeah.
forward.
As you remember, I'm not the wedding planner, but I don't think 10 o'clock would work. If somebody wants to get married on a Sunday and they want to have a wedding, they need to be able to go to 11 o'clock. Or actually, our wedding planner said they need to go to 12, and they said, we're not going to 12. That would be a burden.
Mr. Cleary is also proposing music change too. Right now you have the music stopping and the event stopping at the same time.
Then they'll go home. They'll go home.
I understand. But he's thinking that people will leave is what he's...
Well, and also,
assuming.
I noticed that the decibel studies were done with the 10 o'clock cutoff. And I think if there seems to be, at least to me, an implication that that would be kind of a normal stopping point in terms
I
of
don't
noise.
think that study had a cutoff at 10.
Where did you pull out the thing that showed till 10 p.m.? The slide? You had a slide that showed 10 p.m.
They were done to show that at 10 p.m. to 8 a.m.
There's no noise.
The county noise level drops to 5 dB to 50. So the daytime noise level limit is 55. And then at 10 o'clock, it drops to 50. My study showed that it was going to be well below this level at any time during
That's the county ordinance, so.
Okay, so
So if I'm exceeding that,
Yeah.
then
You got problems.
the neighbor one of the adjoining property owners can call the county sheriff's office. and they
after
can
whatever certain.
come and issue a citation.
Gotcha.
So at each of the property lines, we calculated and measured
Okay, I see.
that the sound level will be about 40
Okay.
dB, which is about 10 dB less than any
Okay.
nighttime limit.
All right.
Okay.
I have a question for council. Does anybody else have more questions for Mr. Brinkman? Keep bringing him back up here.
Yeah, let's get this exercise.
Yeah. I have a question for council regarding the fireworks. Since there is a provision to apply for a firework permit, would we be arbitrary and capricious in denying a permit to this application? Because there is a process to go
Yes, the fireworks are also under conditional use permits, and there will be the same process shortened for fireworks to be granted. I guess if the applicant is fine to waive that conditional use permit that he could otherwise get, then sure.
Okay. Okay. You still want to, you want to make a motion to amend any of the proposed recommendations?
Well, Mr. Brinkman has indicated that the firearms and fireworks would not be on the service. I'd like to amend it with, add that condition.
Now, the problem with the firearms.
I can't.
I said during the ceremony, during the
Fireworks
timeframe,
or
the
Fireworks
events.
or firearms?
Both, during the event times.
Since we have a concealed carry.
No, I mean, people were talking about the concerns of, it being shot off during the, while these events are going on. Right?
I
You don't
think
think
I'd
that-
only be comfortable with a fireworks restriction.
Why don't we address them separately?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Okay,
You
so
wanna
then I
make a
would say
motion on
no
the-
fireworks during the event.
I'll second your motion.
Okay. There's been a motion made and seconded that we place a recommendation, which is number 10, that there would be no fireworks display during any events, meetings, or functions held on the subject property. Let's see.
Not to complicate it too much, but do we want to give them an exclusion for 4th of July celebrations? I mean,
I don't have an opinion on that.
have no opinion?
He's offered not to have it, I think that we're fine.
Okay.
Let me get an extra sheet.
Do you need it for this one, for this amendment, or not?
Do I need, I have to have a record on this one? Or would
Do you have to have a vote on the amendment to it?
If I'm hearing the amendment correctly, it's only during the events, during
Right.
meetings, events. So the property owner
Yeah.
could still, as any property owner could, apply for a permit for a fireworks display themselves
Correct.
at any time. Okay.
Yeah,
That's what I want to
so
make sure.
it was for, just no fireworks for any, for all events, meetings, or functions held on the subject property. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Do I need to have an individual vote on this?
I don't remember. Well, it's been a while.
Yeah.
Well, right now, you only are offering one amendment.
Correct.
So there's nothing else unless you're
We got to pass the amendment.
accepting staff recommendations and then amending it as well. That's your total.
Okay,
list of
okay, that'll be our total vote. Okay. So,
Are you also staying with the 11 o'clock?
We need a vote to add that one
amendment,
amendment.
yeah.
Because then he's going to then, I presume, we're going to
Vote
talk
on-
about
yeah.
the next one.
Yeah, okay. So I have a motion to amend the staff proposal to add a recommendation restricting fireworks during any meeting or event on the subject property. It's been a motion and a second. All in favor, sign aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. That amendment passes. Is there any further amendments?
So we're staying with the recommendation of 11 o'clock?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Chair will entertain a motion to pass CUP 18-18 and to include the recommendations by staff as amended.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Mr. Fromm made the motion. Mr. Klinghammer second. Mr. McBride, how do you vote?
Yes.
I vote yes. Mr. Cleary?
Yes.
Mr. Fromm?
Yes.
Mr. Kuhn?
Yes.
Mr. McDonald?
Yes.
Mr. Klinghammer?
Yes.
Okay. Motion passes. Okay.
When will that be before the county council?
Monday, March 11th. Yeah.
So
And if you spoke and did not fill out a speaker card, please fill out one of the speaker cards so we get your name and address correct in the record. Okay, next on the agenda is rezoning request and preliminary plat for Auden Prairie, Wilson Road, and Country Life Lane. This has been continued. Do I have a motion to bring this back before the council?
So moved.
Second?
Yep.
All those in favor, sign aye.
Aye.
Okay. This is application RZ 18-12 and PRE 18-19. Owner Wilson T&B LLC, developer J.S. Clement Construction LLC. Current zoning A agricultural district, 5-acre minimum lot size. Requested zoning RR single family residential district, 3-acre minimum lot size. Number of lots 16. Parcel size is 51.18 acres. It's located on the west side of Wilson Road, approximately 800 feet northwest of Lakeway Drive near Brommelstick Park, located in Council District 2. Staff.
Again, these are two applications being reviewed concurrently. One is for rezoning, one's for preliminary plat. The property includes 51 acres, and the location is generally west of Highway DD, north of D, and south of Beatty Road. You may remember recently a review of a brew house application, one on the north side of Benny Road, one on the south side of Benny Road. The one on the south side of Benny Road was on the property that was for the Polo Grounds. And this property that we're speaking about tonight actually abuts the southern portion of the Polo Grounds. Although I would say that it's a long, narrow property. If you can see my cursor that's moving here. The Emergency Communications Division of the county has actually already shown the preliminary street at this location. This is Auden Drive. In reality, it would be longer than this. But to the north of the property, you'll see that it's already been subdivided with essentially 3-acre residential lots. To the south of the property, it's already residential 3-acre lots. And again, to the west. So we're really talking about on 3 sides, this property has already been developed for residential subdivisions that for an average of 3-acre lots. Now, that was allowed by right to do before 2006, but in 2006, the county zoning ordinance changed such that you had to have 5-acre lots. And so this property is, they've applied to rezone it from A agricultural district to RR single family residential district, which would allow the continuation of this pattern, this land use pattern of 3-acre residential lots, should this be so developed. You may know also that for a rezoning case, your recommending body, but for preliminary plat, this body actually approves or denies preliminary plats. So in your packet also, you'll see a draft preliminary plat for the Auden Prairie subdivision. Includes 16 lots on a single cul-de-sac. This cul-de-sac goes towards the west end of the property, but not all the way to the end. When this first came in, we discussed specifically should or should this not, the cul-de-sac, should it connect with Country Life Lane to the north? You'll see that that currently dead ends on the property line. It turns out, according to the applicant, there's a high-pressure pipeline that crosses this property at the very northwest corner. And so if they connect their street, Auden Drive, to Country Life Lane, it would have to basically go over or cross that pipeline. Now, that can be done. I mean, we have various places in the county where roadways cross pipelines, but the applicants are suggesting that in this case it's an unnecessary risk because Country Life Lane doesn't necessarily go anywhere. This is not like Collector Street where it carries traffic across an area wide. You're really talking about a potential loop road, a local street that either way the traffic is going to be carried just fine to Wilson Road, and that's the thinking of the engineer. Normally, our code says that unless there's unusual circumstances, streets should connect, but they're citing this as an unusual circumstance where they'd like to not connect. And so that's part of this application is that consideration. County staff, in terms of the plat, county staff is recommending that the Planning and Zoning Commission approve the preliminary plat contingent upon the county council approving the rezoning application.
Okay. Any questions for staff? So if we required the two roads to connect, and then they come in to do work on the high-pressure line, and they then tore up the road since it was across the easement, who would bear the cost of putting it back?
I don't know specifically who would bear the costs. I think it would.
Is this going to be a private street or?
Let's see. Gotta get this correct. Country Life Lane is a private street, and then this will propose to be a public street. So I think it may depend in part on how the easement is written. If you're encroaching in an easement, you have to get permission from the easement holder, and it probably depends on how that whatever agreement that there is between the two parties on who bears the cost of reconstruction or
Any
repair.
other questions for staff?
No.
Okay. If not, we'll ask the applicant to come forward. Were there any letters for the record?
One moment. I'll have to check. Let's see. We did have letters of, we had comments from Missouri Department of Natural Resources, from Public Water Supply District Number 2, from Spire Energy, letter of support from Steve Summercamp, letter of support from Matt Murphy, support from William Steemel, and support from Michael O'Toole.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners.
You solemnly swear or affirm that you will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in these proceedings under the pains and penalties of perjury?
Yes.
Please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Marvin Glore. I'm with Bax Engineering, and our office is located at 221 Point West Boulevard in the city of St. Charles.
Okay, go ahead, Mark.
Okay. As far as the rezoning, like Robert had indicated, we've got two items on the agenda, the rezoning of the property and the proposed preliminary plat. The rezoning of the property, as indicated, is consistent with the development that's taken place around this particular piece of property where the 3-acre lots have been developed in this area. And that's why we've requested a rezoning from the 5 acres to the RR, which is a 3-acre lot minimum, which is consistent with the other adjoining properties as far as 3-acre lot. Is there any other questions on the rezoning portion of the property?
Any questions?
Not on the rezoning, but I do have a couple of questions.
Okay. All right. On the preliminary plat, we are proposing 16 lots, 3-acre lot minimum plus, one single access to a cul-de-sac towards the back part of the property. The discussion about the connection to the Country Life project is that the pipeline that's existing there, while most pipelines and transmission lines you can cross an easement, this particular one would require you to run parallel with that, hence putting the pipeline possibly underneath the pavement for that whole length that Mr. Meyer was showing you. And the pipeline company doesn't want that. They're not going to allow that. They'll allow you to cross, but they're not going to allow you to put your road parallel and over the top of their pipeline. which explains probably the question about who's going to pay for that. You know, they're not going to pay for it. That's why they won't allow it. So, other than that, I mean, I'll be happy to answer any questions on the preliminary plat
Is
then.
the size of the cul-de-sac sufficient for emergency vehicles to turn around?
Yes, it is sized to handle fire trucks, you know, which goes to a larger cul-de-sac.
Any questions about the plat? Any questions about? Mr. Cleary, do you have?
No,
any?
I think I think now that I've seen the detail on this, that answers my question. I was about where that pipeline is, although it is interesting that they did allow Country Life Lane, according to this plat, to build right over it.
Yeah, I don't know how old that plat is. You know, rules keep changing all the time on the thing. Our streets, by the way, our streets will be private streets as well as the adjacent ones are.
Any questions about runoff, water, sewer?
Yeah, I think those are good questions. How's this going to drain?
Oh, we're kind of on the ridge there, where part of the property drains to the north and part of it drains to the south. And so the southern part where the entrance is and that would drain to the southeast corner, and the other parts of the property would just sheet flow off the property.
There's no retention or
No.
detention necessary on this?
No.
Any other questions?
And is that going to be public water, or are those going to be individual?
There is public water in the area in the other two subdivisions. What I understand about the water is the Public Water District Number 2 is going to put a bigger main line in out there, which I don't know when they'll do that. But at the very least, we would hope for being able to get domestic service. We will not get fire protection off of these lines out there, because some of these lines are 2.5 inch, which is similar to the two projects. We worked on two projects on Highway D north of here, and they are service lines to provide domestic service, but not fire protection. That would be the Lauderdale Estates, and then up by Totebush and Highway D, the White Heron and that project up there. So until the Public Water District Number 2 comes in and upgrades their lines in this area out here, it's very difficult, if impossible, to provide the fire protection.
What is the surface of the street going to be? The surface?
The surface?
Yes.
The requirements, minimum requirements are 8 inches of rock, and then, you know, the developer has a choice if he wants to put it into public standard and in a public road. He's not chosen to do that, but this particular subdivision, like a lot of the larger lot subdivisions, you're not going to have people driving on gravel roads, so I would guess that we would have like an asphalt surface.
Yeah. No, I guess my concern was also in terms of, like, if emergency vehicles getting back there, and also, since that's a private street, if there's going to be kids, are they going to have to go down to Wilson Road to catch the bus, things like that? Just curious.
I mean, all it takes is a couple property owners probably to petition a school district, and they'll go drive down the cul-de-sac.
If it's
That's
private.
2,400 feet, so I would guess that they would probably drive down that
But there's the
cul-de-sac.
biggest turnaround radius?
Yes, absolutely.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, sir.
Mr. Chair, I do apologize. I need to go pick up my wife who was delayed coming in.
Thank you.
You want me to call you and tell her to send meeting? You want to come back?
We will now open the public hearing for application RZ 18-12 and application PRE 18-19. Is anyone here wishing to speak regarding either or both of these applications?
I'm also here for the applicant. I just want to make a few comments, if that's okay. Briefly.
You solemnly swear or affirm that you will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in these proceedings under the pains and penalties of perjury.
I do.
Please state your name and address for the record.
Lisa Johnson, I'm an attorney with Smith Amundsen, and our address is 120 South Central, Clayton, 63105.
Where's Brad?
He's out of town.
Oh, we're happy you're here. And sitting here.
I just want to make a few clarification that this is on a private road, and Country Life is on a public road. So I just want to make sure that was clear, because I think the opposite was
The other
stated.
side. Yeah,
Yeah, and the other thing that I wanted to mention was that this is within the county's tree preservation requirements. There's going to be a limited removal of trees on the site.
Okay. Any questions? Saying none, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else here care to speak regarding either of these applications?
What were you waiting for? What were you waiting for?
I don't want to cut anybody else off there again.
You solemnly swear or affirm that you'll tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in these proceedings under the pains and penalties of perjury.
Yes, I do.
Please state your name and address for the record.
Yes, Arnie C. A.C. Dinoff, P.O. Box 1535, O'Fallon. First of all, the intent to reduce the acreage from 5 acres to 3 acres, the intent back in '06 was because of septic systems. So I want to ensure, as we all know, Ducka Creek is not going to service this neighborhood, as was testified by the applicant. So is there enough room for the fields of the septic systems so there's not going to cause any problems to the 2 adjoining neighborhoods, both on the south and the north? That's one concern. That was the intent of the 5 acres. And as you all know, I opposed the change in the urban core from 5 acres to 3 acres in the comprehensive plan. And I think this borders that Highway N corridor. And so I'd like to hear from Mr. Myers, the Director of Planning, whether it's within that corridor or outside of that, which would require the 5 acres. But in the meantime, they're requesting a rezoning to 3 acres. So as I've testified before on other projects, where is the communication? Where are our partners in this planning process? There was no communication, and our partners need to be included. Number one, the Wentzville Fire Protection District. I see no letter from the fire marshal or the fire chief. I don't even think they were even contacted by the county. What about responding access? Is this turning radius, the engineer says it's good, but what about the fire chief, and what about the fire department with their ladder trucks? Are they going to be able to make a turning radius? What about the Wentzville Fire Protection District not having access to fire hydrants? That's of concern. Where's the St. Charles County Ambulance District letter of support? Were they even contacted by county staff in this, looking at this project? What about the Wentzville School District? Number one, the schools are overcrowded. Can they service this neighborhood with the elementary school boundaries in present form? And number two, was the Director of Transportation contacted the Wentzville School District to make sure that adequate bus access is appropriate and that access is there with the turning radius? And the last item of concern is water detention and retention. We want to flood out any of the neighbors, both to the north or to the south. When you put in another 16 homes, what kind of cause is that going to be of water issues when it rains? In the last 2 years, or last 3 years, we've had 2 rain events that produced over 10 inches of rain in a 24-hour period. Where is all that water going to go? It's going to go somewhere. So we sent county staff out there to look at the lay of the land and to see that we're not going to flood somebody else out, either north or south in those subdivisions. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak regarding either or both of these applications? Seeing no one, we will close the public hearing, bring this back to the commission. Any questions of staff, comments?
Ready?
Chair will entertain a motion to approve application RZ 18-12, which will rezone the subject property from 5 acres to 3 acres.
So moved.
Second. Mr. Fromm made the motion. I'll get Mr. McDonald. Mr. Cleary's not here. Mr. McBride, how do you vote?
Yes. Mr. Cleary's here.
Oh,
Mr. Klinghammer. Klinghammer.
Mr. Klinghammer,
At least
yeah,
in body.
okay.
He left.
I vote yes. Mr. Cleary?
Yes, I am here, and
Mr. Fromm?
Yes.
Mr. Kuhn?
Yes.
Mr. McDonald?
Yes.
Okay. That motion passes. Chair will entertain a motion, preliminary plat approval, 18-19.
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
Mr. Fromm, yes, the second. Mr. Kuhn, Mr. McDonald?
Yes.
Mr. McBride?
Yes.
I vote yes. Mr. Cleary?
Yes.
Mr. Fromm?
Yes.
Mr. Kuhn?
Yes.
Okay, motion passes. Okay. Next on the agenda is approval of the December 19th, 2018 regular meeting minutes.
Make a
Chair,
motion to approve.
is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, sign aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes, minutes are approved. Next on the agenda is election of officers. We were, I guess, supposed to do this last month, but since we didn't meet, so we.
Who's the current officers right now? You
I'm the
and
chairman.
Tom's secretary?
Mr.
Who's
Kuhn is
vice chair?
secretary, and Mr. Cleary, you're vice chair, correct?
Correct.
Correct.
I make a motion to retain the current slate of officers for 2019.
Second.
Okay. Motion's been made and seconded. The current officers are re-elected to another one-year term. Those in favor, sign aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Okay, next is a review of draft ordinance amending sections 405.510 and 405.535 of the county code. You have that in your packet. These motions, this was presented by Mr. Griffin to increase the notice radius when dealing with applications in a rural area. Instead of 500 feet, it goes to 2,000 feet. Now, do we vote on this or just make a recommendation, or what do we do, Mike?
This is going to be, I think, RD is just going to provide an update of where we're at.
Okay.
Yeah, if you recall, on October 17th, at that meeting, the motion was made, seconded. No details were discussed at the time, so there was really nothing to carry on and present to the county council. So to close that loop, I drafted the ordinance that you have.
I gotcha.
So this is my interpretation, basically, of what the commission intended for that change to be. It's just an example. You can approve as is and approve basically taking it forward to recommend it to the county council. And then the county council will take action, final action.
Okay. Has everyone had a chance to review it? Basically takes the notice requirement from 500 feet to 2,000 feet, basically, in agricultural districts. Anybody have any questions? Chair will entertain a motion that we approve the draft as presented.
So moved.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh,
If I could just add real quickly, I'm sorry, it's jogging my memory because it's been a few weeks since I've reviewed this, but we did do a cost analysis, and the difference would be, we figure about $1,000 a year for additional mailings, because there are some additional mailings to do, but Another question we had was, just so everyone maybe jog your memory, what happens within that 2,000 feet if there are, instead of an exclusively agriculture area, what if you have a residential subdivision? And so now you're including all of these residential lots. Those are some things to think about, but anyway, if I understand it correctly, what you have before you is an interpretation of what was stated at that meeting. Just try to put that on paper, is that right?
Well, you did bring up this intent back in October. So my draft was also trying to accommodate.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
And yes, there was an issue.
Except when the parcel land was right.
Property was supposed to be agricultural, or the surrounding areas, or a combination of both, and, you know, without actually having something concrete to look at, I cannot anticipate what that would look like. So this basically makes the subject property in agricultural zoning district, and more than 75% of the linear boundary of that property also adjoin agricultural.
Okay.
But there might be an occasion where that other 25% is a subdivision, but I think the intent that we felt that those people deserve notice.
Yeah. Correct. I think that was the intent, because I think the subject came up because there was a property that was, I believe, a cell tower in the middle of a farm, which essentially the previous restrictions would have essentially covered the boundaries of the farm. So I think that was why we decided to do this in the first place.
It still could be that much.
Yeah.
Yeah, it still could be that.
But if they're that far away, then.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? We've got a motion and a second.
One quick, this is going to go before the county council for discussion and tweaking and all that stuff too. Okay. Yeah.
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 At this point, the ordinance will show that it's being requested by the commission.
Planning and zoning. Okay.
Sponsorship.
We'll see. Just put his name on it.
We'll put his name down, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead and put his name down. I make a motion. We do that.
Okay. All those in favor of approving the draft as presented? Sign aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Planning and Zoning Division update.
Well, a couple of things. First of all, thank you for your role in the master plan process. The 2030 master plan, the county council did approve that within the last month. And so at this moment, it's now official, and so it is the master plan for St. Charles County, the 2030 master plan. And within the next few weeks, we're anticipating that we'll have the finalized master plan, the printed copy ready to print. It may take a few days or a few weeks to print, but we'll have that ready, we believe. And also, we'll have the PDF posted online. And also, which I think is pretty exciting, we're preparing and should have shortly an online interactive version of the master plan so that you could review different sections. You could don't necessarily have to review it in a linear fashion like you would a report or a book, but you could jump between different concepts and chapters. You can review it to your level of interest, whether just very top level or whether you want to get into all the details. I think that the online version of the master plan, we think it could be an educational tool, not only for the general public, but maybe even for school kids. It's really a pretty exciting next step, I think, for the county and the master plan. I would like to thank the Master Plan Committee as well, Master Plan Steering Committee, for everything that they did. Second, I want to let you know that for reappointments, obviously, periodically, members are reappointed. Mr. McDonald was recently reappointed. And the appointments that have expired recently, Mr. McDonald's expired recently, but also Gary Griffin's expired in the fall. And so for District 2, now, instead of Gary Griffin, We have a new Planning and Zoning Commissioner, Diane Sally, S-A-A-L-E, and she is intending to start the next meeting, to join us at the next meeting in March. So we wanted to welcome Diane Sally and also thank Gary Griffin for his many years of service, his contribution. It's really been amazing assistance that he's provided for, I don't know exactly how many years, but I want to say about 15 years.
Wow.
Right. So thank you for Gary, and thank you for Robert and everyone else, because as I always say over and over again, you all are volunteers, but the work that you do is critical for what we do. I mean, we wouldn't be able to function really without all of our volunteer boards and commissions that help keep the work moving forward.
Thank you. Any questions for staff while we have them here? If not, the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, sign aye.
Go slow.
Aye.
Aye. Meeting's adjourned.